Hello, everyone. I'm Angel Melo. I'm producer and director at Sucker Punch Productions and Maruti Blue Productions. First of all, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Uh, we are deeply grateful to all of you. Well, Sucker Punch Productions is a film production company based in London that is focused on creating inspiration and content that promotes solutions and opportunities, such as documentaries, fiction films. So we are getting there bit by bit. And along Maruti Blue Productions, which is my production company in Rio, we have been developing tools to do that in the UK and in Brazil. We've decided to create this class because we truly believe in the power of networking, and we hope it can become a kind of a platform to connect filmmakers worldwide. And we keep developing tools to promote solutions to our industry. And we all know that everything we need right now is solutions, right? So again, thank you so much. I'm gonna pass the ball to Rupert Charmak, director at Sucker Punch Productions.
Thank you, Angel. Wow, there's so many faces keep popping up. Thank you so much, everyone who's joining us all over the world. There's so many people from Brazil. It's crazy. It's amazing. And the UK. So thank you. And I just want to say again, a massive thank you to our amazing panelists who have joined us. Rafael, Peixoto, Pamella, Bisson. I get the difficult names out the way first. Peter Beer, Jesse Quinones, and Martin Gentles. A massive thank you. You guys are amazing. Definitely did not expect for all of you to say yes. And I was expecting for someone to drop out, and we definitely got our A team, so thank you. So firstly, I'm just gonna do a little bit of housekeeping. As you'll see that your audio will be off. If you could keep it off, that would be great, even though we'd love to hear your lovely voices, but it could get a bit chaotic. But hopefully at the end, we'll have time for some questions and a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please feel free just to type them in the chat box, and we'll try and ask them the best we can for you. The session should be about an hour and a half max. So in the UK, that will be going till 9:30 latest, and then in Brazil, I think that's 5:30. So yeah, I think just to start things off, I'm gonna start with you, Martin. So you founded Star Child Pictures with Ed King back in 2010, I believe. You exec produced The Liability. You produced How, more recently His House, which was backed by New Regency and which was bought by Netflix. And you have been nominated for a BAFTA for Outstanding British Film of the Year. So a huge congratulations, and that's fully deserved. Yeah, I guess I just want to ask firstly, how did you kind of get into filmmaking? My audio off?
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I was unmuted. I couldn't get it.
Oh, there we go.
Thanks for that extraordinary, generous introduction, Rupes. How did I get into filmmaking? Mine is a very indirect road. I had one of my brothers-in-law had a production company and stuff like that. So I saw it a little bit, within my familial environment. But I never thought it was something that I could actually do. So I went off and I studied, philosophy at university and did lots of boring stuff. But I was always working on movies, just as a student, just helping out on friends. I'd befriend all the filmmakers in film schools, and I would help out on their films just in part-time. And then I was sort of looking at doing a philosophy master's, and I thought that's really boring. And I actually, it was my then girlfriend was going to do a master's degree in film. And I was like, oh, wow, you can do that? I had no, I didn't realize that someone normal could just go and do a film degree and, a master's degree in film. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so the next 2 years later, I did the same degree she did. And that was sort of my launch pad into into the industry. From there, you know, beginning to make contacts, starting at the very bottom, just making coffee for people in a post-production company, and then, you know, getting a job in music videos and commercials. I worked in that a long time. I worked with, I got a job with Alan Parker, and worked with him for a couple of years. And then just sort of, you know, I'll give you the abridged version, sorry, but yeah, just, it was just a very, very, very slow process. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. So it was just long, slow, boring process. So yeah, that's it.
Cool. Yeah, I think everyone can relate to the long, slow process. How's it been for you during the pandemic? I mean, I guess like as in life, but also as a filmmaker. Yeah. Obviously, his house came out amazing. Like, what was it like?
I mean, we were extraordinarily fortunate with the timing of his house coming out, because we'd done the deal with Netflix just prior to things kicking off. We did the deal sort of in the January when obviously, sorry, no, it was in December when the first reports of coronavirus was starting to happen. We did the Netflix deal. Originally, you know, truth be told, and again, between us friends, just us, you know, 50 odd people, you know, when New Regency told us that they were doing the deal with Netflix, we were a little disappointed. We were like, oh, we really wanted a theatrical. And we thought it could break out. And so we were a little bit disappointed. But the moment Netflix came on, they were phenomenal. Their ambition and their vision for marketing this film and getting it out there was immense. They had more confidence in it than us, which is kind of rare. You know, we were thinking, oh, this is a small, weird film that, you know, people like me were like, but not a lot of people gonna like it. You know, it's sort of more of a thing like that. And they just went hell for leather on it. And you know, I'm glad to say that their faith was vindicated. So you know, it was really lucky. And I think obviously, you do have to acknowledge that the pandemic played a key part in the level of attention it got. Even as a Netflix release, the pandemic really did influence that. I don't think, I mean, we were #1 in America. You know, this little weird film was #1 in America, you know, for a while. That's a pandemic thing. No, again, just being real, it was about the pandemic. So, you know, leading up to it and for the release of the movie, that was, you know, the pandemic meant that we just got more eyeballs, and it was sort of very lucky in that sense. For us, we're a two-man outfit. We are very small. We're very mobile. You know, we don't have overheads and all of that stuff. We don't have offices and things like that. Whatever precious little money that we can get hold of, it goes into getting new projects. So for us, it was really, we didn't have a lot of overhead, and we weren't sort of like stuck. We were developing lots of projects and trying to get those going. Now we're at that point. We've been through the pandemic, the lockdown, and, you know, in the UK, we are sort of coming out of it. I don't know, maybe that's presumptuous for me to say, but, you know, we're sort of at that point. So when we're now trying to get those projects out in front of people, and, you know, we're doing all of that, you know, but we're doing all virtually, obviously, still, because we're not meeting anyone just yet. So we've been sending things off, and, you know, so it's a bit awkward, a bit difficult. It's harder to, you know, to communicate that passion, to sell, you know, your take on it. It's all just much more like, here's an email or there's a Zoom, and it can never really replace that face-to-face interaction of, you know, as a producer, particularly independent producers, as, you know, many of us will know, it's selling. It's a sales job, and it's hard to sell when you've got this sort of medium of the Zoom call between you and the decision maker. So it makes it harder, but, you know, at the same time, everyone's more willing to take, you know, online calls, so you can get through, the volume that you can get through is higher. So, you know, it's, you know, higher volume, maybe lower quality. That's the trade-off, I guess, at the moment.
That's really interesting.
Please stop me. I will talk a lot, so you've got to stop
me. That's great. I think that's really interesting, because you kind of assume that's one of the new things that's happened is Zoom. You know, obviously it's been around for a bit, but everyone's found it, and you're like, wow, we can have this dialogue, we can meet people like this. And Jesse was just saying he's in the car doing his meetings constantly all day, and yeah, you don't necessarily think that could be a negative factor as well, because you don't get that face-to-face. That's super interesting. I guess lastly, before I move on, we pass it on to Angel, but how was it working with the studio for the first time? I mean, you did just say to us, you know, it was, I'll let you explain, but yeah, the benefits, maybe the drawbacks, expectations, unexpectations. What was that like?
I'm assuming everyone here is sort of an independent filmmaker or interested in becoming an independent filmmaker rather than sort of ensconced in a major company. So from that point of view, you know, our experiences making other films has been incredibly hands-on. So as a producer, you know, I'm also the caterer and I'm also the driver and I'm also the, you know, that's what we do. You know, it's like, I always say to people, the uninitiated, I always tell them that, you know, when they ask me, oh, what does a producer do? And I always say, whatever needs to be done. You know, that is what the producer does. That's why it's an ill-defined title. It's not a title that you can know what someone did in the picture by just really mean anything, you know. But as an independent producer, as someone who goes out there, you know, and, you know, you have to be a part writer, part director, you know, part editor, salesman, financier, and as I said, runner. You know, you're doing everything. You're doing a little bit of everything. You're plugging holes where they need to be plugged. Now, working with the studio, you get this wonderful release from all of that, and you're liberated, and it's wonderful. The trade-off is, as an independent producer, you have very little. Once the thing's going, you have very little pull on the project. And again, that's just a fact. It's like they go, right, you know, we're putting in all this money and we're doing all this and we know what we're doing and we know better than you. So we're going to, you know, we'll take on board what you say, but if we ignore you, if you don't like what you say, that's it. And that's something you have to adjust to. And that was something I never did adjust to. I'm used to, you know, getting my hands dirty and trying to wrangle with problems. You know, I very much feel and come from the creative producer element of it. So going through development, we developed it independently. We didn't have any studio involvement at the development stage. We were totally, it was just us. I mean, we had, you know, 4 sentences. Someone came to us, another writer came to us with an idea with 4 sentences. And we said, oh, that could be cool. And then we sat down and we just came up with a story, beat it all out. Like, okay, let's come up with a big story. And we, you know, we brought in that J horror, you know, spooky girl ghost element. We brought all that in. The original pitch was just refugees in a haunted house. Pretty much, that was it. And then we said, okay, let's fill this out and let's make it about the refugee experience and let's bring all of that in. So we were building that all up and we came up with this lovely, elaborate treatment. And then we brought in the director whom we were sharing offices with. So I had an office with a good buddy of mine called John Hasse, who's a music video and commercials exec producer. And we had met Remy and he was just this super talent that we really liked, had never done a movie, never written a script. And we were like, okay, then, you know, I think if we can get this to a place, we can imagine him doing some of these visuals and, you know, bringing that incredible eye that he has to this project, it'd be amazing. And so we pulled him in and then he just had great ideas as well. And he came up with the best idea in the film. If people haven't seen it, I won't tell, but it was his idea. That big idea was his idea. And so we incorporated that into the script and then we're working on the script and, you know, we weren't quite happy with where it's going. So he said, I want to write it, even though he'd never written anything. And we were like, this is insane. You haven't got anything to show, but, you know, I say all of this because I'm starting to ramble again. But I say all this anyway to say that was the process. It was so hands-on and you're sort of pulling things and you're constantly involved. And then, you know, as you go through the process of pitching it to different studios and all of that, and then suddenly you settle on a studio and it's all great and you know you're working so well, and then there's a point at which it's just like, okay, thanks very much, you know, and then you're pitching your ideas, but you're just another voice in the room, and that was tough to take. You know, that's not an easy thing, particularly if you want to be hands-on. So that's the big difference. Just independent, it's way harder, but you are in it, you know, and you feel, you know, if there's something you don't like, it's like, well, that's on me because I did that, you know. But if there's something you don't like and it's someone else's thing, it's harder to take and to take the knocks for it. So, you know, especially for director as well, you know, it's difficult when you have to sort of swallow those things that are slight impositions. But again, want to stress, and not just saying it just for political reasons, it was a really good experience overall. It's just the reality of the difference between independent and studio filmmaking for independent producers.
Cool. Very interesting. Thank you. Pass it on to Angel. She can carry on.
Yeah. So, well, what can I say about Rafael Peixoto? We are on the same boat. We are facing lots of challenges right now. Rafael is an award-winning screenwriter in Canada, Holland, and the US. He's been teaching screenwriting for many years now. He's in August, we hope so, gonna start shooting his first, his debut in feature. So Rafael, my question is quite hard, but so what is, as a creator, what is the biggest challenge that you're facing right now in Brazil?
Well, thank you for the kind words. I wish I can live up to you. Actually, we are facing a lot of challenges right now in Brazil. The first one is the absolute absence of political policies for cinema in Brazil. They are all extinguished by the actual government. This process started a few years ago, and it's evolving, and it's even worse than ever. Then we have this second wave of COVID here. Productions are getting more expensive, maybe 20% more expensive. So we have a scenario where we don't have money to shoot, and the shooting has become more expensive. So we're trying to make smaller movies, more contained movies. And the independent market is flourishing a little bit, but not the way it used to be a few years ago, because in 2015, 16, if I'm not mistaken, we have produced around 120 movies, features in Brazil. It is about a quarter of the production of the US, for example. So it's a huge production. And now I don't have the numbers here because Ancine, which is our official agency, has not released it yet. But I don't think that we are going to produce more than maybe 20 or 30 movies in 2020. So COVID has halted all the productions. This is the main problem we are facing right now. The disease here is spiraling up, so people are dying. We are having 3,000 people dying each day. So things are rough here. And for filmmakers, we are facing the problem of the money, the funding. It's the main one. But we are also facing a problem of adaptation, I think, because people were used to work with a more better environment with regards to funding, with regards to structure. So we used to have movies with a set of 300 people, 350 people, 100 people. It was normal to have movies this size. But now we are facing the distinguishing of this policy, so we don't have the sets now. So we have less jobs. People are so although we have about 5 to 6 streaming companies coming to Brazil and making and paying for production here and producing things here, they are not coming closer to what we have produced in the past years, over the past year. So we have a lot of technicians that don't have jobs. We have people, I know actors and sound technicians and camera crew that are driving Uber, for instance, or delivering iFood. So people are having a hard time to find some jobs. And now when things started to heat up again, we had the second wave of COVID. So people are taking the shooting to Uruguay, for instance. Some of them are going to Argentina. So we are losing jobs for our neighbor countries because we didn't do our job to contain the disease, to buy vaccines and so on and so forth. So I think that maybe on the second semester, which is the period that we're going to shoot our movie by August or September, I think that things will be clearing up. But what I see in Brazil is that the audience, I taking back the conversation to what towards the subject of the panel on the first place, I think that people here in Brazil are seeking. We are a very warm people, you know that. We like comedies. We like to touch people. We like to be near the guy, near everyone. So I think that movies are inclining to present a more lighter reality, because the real reality is too harsh. It's too hard to face. So that's why we are seeing light comedies coming up, few good movies coming up here in Brazil. I think that this is the scenario we are going to see for the next months, which is bad for me because our movie is a thriller. So let's see how it goes on that scenario. But things are quite hard here.
Yeah. Yeah, in the UK, if I'm not wrong, they've just released, like, I don't remember how much in pounds, but they are, helping the industry, the culture, and the cultural sector. In Australia, I've been talking to friends over there also. But in Brazil, what support has been given during the pandemic?
By the state, we had the Aldir Blanc law, which has lifted some productions, a few, because it's not the amount of money that we used to have, but we have a few. We had a few. Some private companies have sent some help. Netflix started a fund. Sony Pictures started a fund. So these companies helped the people from the audiovisual chain, audiovisual industry. So it was not for them. We would be in a very hard position right now. But from the government, some states or some municipalities have specific laws, like São Paulo, for instance. They have the SPCine, São Paulo Cine Commission, São Paulo Film Commission, and Rio de Janeiro has launched a few programs also in Niterói, where I live, near Rio de Janeiro too. But they're not they can't be compared in volume to what Ancine used to do. We are talking about in dollars, maybe maybe what, $500 million, $300 million accumulated in Ancine. In Brazil, this is a huge money, because in Brazil, most of our productions, including high value production, movies with high value of production, usually cost between 5 million to 10 million reais. I'm talking about $2 million. So what every other country considers a very low budget production, in Brazil is a high budget production. So when we're talking about $300 million halted by the government, we are talking about maybe 100 movies waiting to be shot. So in each one of these movies would hire about 100 to 200 people. So we are talking about a huge lack of employment, a huge lack of production, and the art is totally halted. Not only in the movie industry, but exhibitions, plays, all the music, all the ecosystem of the cultural environment, all the cultural industry is put on hold here in Brazil. So things are pretty rough, but we're gonna pass through.
Yeah,
Sure.
and after unfortunately, look like Brazil is always coming with the bad news. But how do you see films being produced in Brazil in the future? Just international co-productions? Because we've been talking about it.
No. I think that our movie, for instance, is going to be a co-production between Brazil and the United States. So I think that we have high qualified people to work on, and we are facing a huge devaluation from our currency in face of the dollar, of the euro. So investing in Brazil to move making is cheaper now, and we have people that are absolutely qualified to do so. We have won several awards in the film industry and the advertising industry as well. So we know that advertising people here in Brazil and movie people here in Brazil, they are mixed up. So a lot of production companies in Brazil do advertising and also do movies as well. So I believe that we're gonna have this private investment coming in, mostly from Europe. There are conversations with the US, with Europe. I'm involved in 3 international co-productions right now, all of them with the US. One of them will be shot entirely here in Brazil. The other will be shot 70% of the movie will be shot here in Brazil. And the other one will be shot half and a half in Brazil, half in the US. So people are coming to us because we have skills and we are cheap now. So I think this is the kind of foreseen future I have now, because we are open to that kind of partnership. But we are also seeing the streaming companies coming with more money. So Netflix is investing what we would consider a high budget production here in Brazil. So Netflix is investing, Disney is investing, and we have the private, the TV sector in Brazil. We have the 3rd and the 5th largest television networks in the world, which is Rede Globo and Rede Record. So these 2 networks produce a lot of stuff. So Globo the streaming service, which is Globoplay, and they are producing original content as well to start competing with international players like Netflix and Amazon. So Amazon has chosen Rio de Janeiro to put his bases here in Brazil, its bases here in Brazil. So I believe that streaming companies will absorb part of the demand, but I see that international productions, co-productions will be the main course of action for us, and to shoot smaller movies, more contained movies. Not only because we don't have money, this is a reality, of course we have to deal with it, but not just because of money, but because of the pandemics as well. So if we have a set with 100 people, how can we test all these guys? How can we keep any hope of controlling, so we are talking about sets with 50 people, 35 people. So you're talking very small productions. So I think that this is the scenario for the next maybe 6 to 7 months. But I think that we'll get back to see huge productions here on 2022. And if the scenario changes, the political scenario changes, we will have a demand that is halted by Ancini, about 600 productions. I'm talking about movies and TV series that are waiting for the release of money. So we have a line now of 600 productions that may be greenlighted from 2022 on. So I believe that the content that's being written and we are producing it right now will be shot maybe in 2014, 2024, or 2023. So I think that we're gonna face maybe 1-2 years of retraction before start growing again. But we are a country of 220 million people, so we can't afford not being a strong industry. We have 2/3 of the population of the U.S. And when Rede Globo, for instance, premieres a soap opera, they have a very strong catalog of soap operas. For instance, a soap opera in Rede Globo is aired for about 50 to 60 million people live. This is maybe 2 times the total audience of Game of Thrones in the world. So we have an audience power that cannot be denied. So I think that this is gonna push the buttons to make things work again. So that's what I hope.
Yeah, all of us. One of the goals of this masterclass, and we want to have others, of course, with different themes, is to connect to people, to show how strong we can be when we decide to support each other. For example, we are all friends here at some point, and again, we're not going to be able to make this without you guys. So are you seeing people in the industry, in the sector, doing this, like helping each other, support each other, like we are doing, like we are working on 2 projects right now? So do you see that in the sector?
Yeah, actually, I see that the technicians, yes. If you're talking about art crew, camera crew, yes, they're doing that. Because people are not working, so they start thinking, okay, I have to help that guy because he worked with me in 6 movies, and and his kids are suffering because he don't have money. The school of his kids is being delayed, so his bills are piling up. So this kind of help is coming, but it's a little bit decentralized. The production sector, we have I don't know the word in English, syndicate. I don't know if
The
that's it.
union.
Union, yes.
The union. Uh-huh.
The production union here in Brazil, we have three strong production unions here in Brazil. The Rio de Janeiro Production Union, which is SICAV, and São Paulo One, and the union of people who produces for TV. They are three strong entities, and they are very united to make things change. So they are creating forums and creating debates and preparing lawsuits against the government to make things work. So this kind of help is coming from them. We have the major companies of the sector. As I said, Netflix has released a fund to help people here in Brazil. If I'm not mistaken, Sony did that too. So companies are starting to get the same momentum and to help people. And the technicians, I'm talking about art people, production people, ADs, DPs, sound mixers. These guys are willing to collaborate with each other. So it's a very good time for instance, first time writer with an incredible script can talk to a great DP and show his script and say, okay, this is my script. Do you like it? And they say, okay, let's gonna do it. Let's gonna produce it.
That's good.
So I think that this is a nice thing because people are really willing to help and to discover new voices. And we have now in Brazil, we have the Clubhouse arriving here, and Clubhouse is sensational. I think this is one of the most disruptive things that I've ever seen, because in Clubhouse we can talk to people that are really, really established in the industry, and they are talking equal to equal on the same with no difference between people there. So we have a very experienced guy, a woman talking to a kid that has just came out of college. So this is very nice for us. So I think that we have this will, we have this desire to make things happen. And money is a problem, but I think that money we can arrange. We can knock on Uncle Sam's door and ask for something, because for them it's gonna be like, okay, 2 tomatoes and 1 banana, and for us it's a movie. So that's the thing that we must pursue, international partnerships. I think that's the future.
Great. Thank you so much. Rupert, back to you and your guest.
Thank you, Rafael. That was great. Super interesting. Jesse, I'm going to go to you now. You're an award-winning writer, director, producer and lecturer at London Met Film School, patron for British Urban Film Fest, and founder of Wolf Cub Productions. You're originally from Miami, where your first feature, Calloused Hands, is set, starring Andre Royo and Daisy Haggard. And more recently, you wrote and directed your latest feature, Cage Fighter Worlds Collide, which you completed just at the beginning of lockdown, which must have been crazy. And your UK release is the 12th of April. So we'll get into that in a bit, but firstly, it'd be great to know just how you got into filmmaking.
Yeah, I'll give you a snapshot version of my entry into filmmaking. I mean, basically, I'm from Miami, came to London in 1999. I started as a journalist. I used to work for the Voice newspapers, the Black British newspaper, which is kind of where I earned my stripes. So I worked there for about 2 years, was a kind of a beat reporter. And after that, went to university, studied theater, and had a very traditional kind of theater training, did the Royal Court Theater, Soho Theater, BBC Writers' Room. And then from there, just sort of had that bug from film the whole time, and started making documentaries, because I think with documentary, you can, you don't need much. You can work with like a 2-man team, And so I was making films. You know, I got some funding to go to Colombia, and I made a documentary there. I went to Bolivia, and that's kind of where I really learned how to, with no budget and you know, work quickly. And then all this while I had this script that I originally wrote it as a book, Callous Hands, which is basically about my life story growing up in Miami. And I just I decided to just put it down on the page and write it. And then I managed to go to LA, meet Andre Royo. He read it and said yes to it, which was amazing. And that became my first feature film. And so, yeah, off the back of that, you know, made it, and it came out, played in festivals, and then I got an agent, and that kind of was definitely the start of the ball rolling for me. You know, micro budget film, you know, for like $250,000 in Miami, and you know, I wanted to go right into my next feature. You know, it's always that there's that saying, you know, with directors, the second feature is actually harder than the first. And I don't know the percentage. Maybe one of you guys on this talk knows, but it's like 5%, maybe less, where first-time directors get to make their second. So I had like a chip on my shoulder. I was like, I really want to get the second one made. And, you know, I was like, I'm going to do it in 2 years. 2 years became 3 years, became 4 years. And then finally, 5 years later, I made Cage Fighter, my second feature film. And that was kind of just a blend of all my passions. I'm a martial artist, you know, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which you know, Rupert, because we train in some of the same places. And then so I love martial arts, and I've always loved the Rocky movies and, you know, Warrior and things like that. And I just thought I want to make my version of that, you know, set in the UK, because I live in the UK, even though I'm American. And yeah, I wrote it, and I think, you know, I wrote it right after I finished Callous Hands, but I think it needed the sport to kind of grow in popularity, and Conor McGregor to go fight Floyd Mayweather, and, you know, all the, and I definitely had to, you know, I'm a director. I think I always see myself as a director first, but I definitely have to wear the producer hat. And I've produced every film that I've made out of necessity, but I've fallen in love with producing. Like, I do love it. So when the sport grew and there was an audience that was there, and I could show sales agents and financiers, look, there's an audience. And Brazil, actually, by the way, was one of the biggest places where I said, you know, this sport is big in Brazil. And I was looking up Globo and all the different statistics, because I had a buddy that used to work at the UFC, and I could kind of rattle off all these numbers. Finally, I was able to get some finance, you know, from some a great company in Canada. And so I went to Canada and made the film, and then COVID happened. And that's all I had to, you know, figure out how to get the movie out. And similar to what Martin was saying earlier, we were meant to have this big theatrical release in the States. And then, you know, that didn't happen. We had a long conversation with our distributor, and we kind of talked about it, and they were like, you know, no one's going to the cinema. And I was like, well, you know, as a director, obviously it's very important for a film to be theatrically released, at least pre-COVID. That was a really important feather in your cap. So for me, it was like a real back and forth, because even though no one was going to go, I was like, well, I need a theatrical release. And then I just signed with a new agent with Gersh in the States, and they're like, you should get a theatrical release. So I had all this pressure on my mind to get it. In the end, we found a compromise, and it came out, and I'm very happy with it. It's been released worldwide, and it's coming to the UK April 12th. And yeah, I'm very proud of it. But yeah, you know, you finish a movie, and then it's back to square one. You gotta go and start making the next one. So I spent lockdown writing a new script, and now the journey begins all over again, you know?
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. I think I remember you saying it took you around 10 years to make Callous Hands, and then 5 years for this one. So every time it's halving it, hopefully to another
half. Yeah, no, it's 13 years. From idea to actually getting it made was 13 years. I wrote Callous Hands, the book, when I was 19. I made it when I was, it came out, and yeah, 13 years later. I don't know the exact year, but yeah, so it was a long journey. Cage Fighter 5. So let's see, maybe this is 2.5. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Maybe less. Yeah.
Do you feel like the pandemic, putting your producer's hat on, was helpful for the film, as I said, selling it during that time? Kind of suddenly having a product where you were like, oh, actually, like, we've got something, we're kind of good to go. You're in the final stage.
I don't think it was necessarily as bad as I initially thought. I mean, I'm maybe a little traditional. I love the theatrical model, and the idea of putting a film in a cinema for a certain amount of time and letting the reviews come in, and you know, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's ego as a director, I don't know. But you want to see a movie in the cinema. But I'm trying to embrace it. You know, it is what it is. I do hope that the theatrical model comes back. Maybe it won't come back in the same way that it did, where there's that window that you have it in the cinema and then it goes to like a TVOD stream. Maybe it becomes more day and date, and that's okay. But I would love it to stay, you know, because I love feature film, you know, and I love the whole streamer kind of system. But like on all my filmmaker friends are like, series is where it's at, TV, but I love the craft of telling a story over 90 minutes. You know, I really love that craft, and I think it's best served in the theatrical model. So I really want it to stay in some way. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's a question I kind of wanted to put to everyone. But do you think there'll always be a need for film, the kind of 90-minute, 2 hour? Do you feel like TV is the format?
I feel film is, yeah, no, I mean, it'd be interesting to see where it goes in the next few years. I do feel like there's a little bit of pressure on that. Like at least in my circle, my writer director friends, they're all about, I want to get into TV. I want to get into streamers and because obviously it's consistent. It's, you know, there's more longevity to it. There's more work to it. And I love it too, but I just the craft of it, you know, being able to tell a story over 90 to 120 minutes. Like I love being able to break a story into those beats and figure that out. So I hope that they can both live side by side and that they both get love. And I mean, it seems like it's happening. Like in the UK here, you know, Sky was pledging to like release a certain amount of movies per year. Netflix the same. You know, so I do hope that that it maintains during COVID. But yeah, I mean, I really do hope as well that the theatrical model, in some shape or form, it's still part of how we release movies. You know, I know for sure the thing I'm working on right now, the new project, I definitely want that to be theatrically released. You know, so you know, I really hope that it when things calm down and everything, that it can kind of get back to the way it was pre-COVID. You know.
Your producers for the Cage, were they Canadian based?
Yeah, they're Canadian. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all Canadian money. I have not. Even though I've been living in the UK, I'm going to sound sour grapes right now, and I don't mean to, but I've been living in the UK for 20 years. I've never gotten a penny from the UK. I've made my first film in Miami. I made my second one in Canada. You know, maybe the third. Who knows? But I have never been married to the idea of making films here. I live here. You know, this is where my home is. But I'll go wherever I get the love. You know, as a saying, you go where the love is. You know, so if I got to go to Romania, Bulgaria, Canada, Miami, I'll go wherever. Brazil. I'll go where the love is, you know? So yeah, let's see. But yeah, Canadian, Calgary, they're based and we shot in Saskatchewan and yeah, they completely backed the project, completely financed it 100%. So yeah.
Yeah, for all the Brazilians out there, Jesse's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we're both massive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu nerds and obsessed with it. But where do you see filmmaking going? Do you see kind of low budget and micro budget films always being needed and a market for them? Or will, as Rafael said, I think you were kind of going along the lines of that will always be necessary, especially right now. Or do you think streamers will be looking for kind of people who have teamed up with bigger studios moving forward? Kind of my last question.
I mean, the conversations that I'm having right now with, you know, because I've got one film I'm kind of in the process of packaging and I'm producing another one at the moment, is that budgets definitely seem to be lower than they were a couple years ago. And there's definitely, there's more risk averse. Financiers are more risk averse, sales agents as well. I mean, a couple months ago, like they were even talking about like, we're not doing MGs at all, you know, and they didn't, you know, they felt there was no pre-sales, no potential for pre-sales at all. That's changing even a few months later. But sales has always been a really fluctuating thing. It's very hard to kind of predict exactly how sales are going to go, even in the best of times. So like when I was talking to sales agents a few months ago, they were like, the forecast was very grim. But already now that the vaccine became introduced, things seem more optimistic. But definitely, you know, budgets seem to be lower than, you know, and like there's one film that I'm producing, and you know, maybe a couple months ago, like a year ago, would have been comfortable at like 3 to 5 million, and now it's more like 1 to 2 kind of thing, you know. And so I've always felt my approach has always been, I don't try to jam a project into a budget. I always sort of have two budgets in my head when I'm putting something together. One is my dream budget if I got my A-list cast, which never happens. And then there's the realistic budget. So I always sort of work more with that anyway. And maybe that goes back to my documentary experience of just figuring out a way to make it work. Cage Fighter was definitely a bigger budget than my first film, but for the kind of movie it is, I mean, it's an action sports film, with loads of martial arts and 4 big fights and stadiums and all this, loads of green screen. It's still a low budget for the kind of movie that it is. So I always feel like, when I'm approaching investors, I feel like my approach is always to like squeeze as much as I can out of whatever I can get and make the best movie I can, and deliver on what I'm pitching, So I think, if the vaccine proves effective and things work out, then that's definitely has an impact. If people feel like society as a whole is safer, then that has a ripple effect on everything, including our industry. And then we can get back to work and making those kind of films. But right now, I think everything is sort of on the lower end. I don't hear anything making, especially here in the UK, anything above 10 million is really tricky. Everything like micro budgets obviously easier and it's harder. Obviously it's harder to get to pre-sell a micro budget film because usually you're not really working with cast that's going to attract pre-sales, but they're obviously the safer bet. But the budgets that I'm seeing are more like kind of 1 to 3 million, and you'd be surprised what kind of actors you can get for that kind of budget, who can still help you pre-sell a film. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of where it's at right now, which I'm fine. I just made a film that like Cage Fighter was like, 1.2 sterling. And I was very happy to work with that budget. And if I had to do it again, I'll do it again. It's cool. So obviously, depending on the genre, I mean, if you're making a rom-com for that kind of budget, you're comfortable. But if you're making something that's more genre or action or thriller or whatever, then you got to be very resourceful with what you have. So I think it's relative to the project, but yeah, definitely it's definitely on the low budget scale right now. It seems to me.
Cool, interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Angel.
Yeah, well, Pamella Bisson, great TV producer in UK. My great friend, been learning so many lessons from each other. You've been bossing your own life and helping others to do the same. And I am one of these people. And as a Black female filmmaker, I know that our challenges are during this pandemic, they are kind of piling up. But I know that you've been providing support to many women in the field. So how have you been doing this?
Wow, thank you very much for that introduction. Wonderful, Angel. It's so lovely to be part of the Sucker Punch webinar. And well, first of all, I think I'll give you a quick background on myself so that I can get to the bossing your life bit. I am a fellow Brazilian, so boa tarde to everybody. Excuse my very poor Portuguese. I've spoken English for too long, a bit like Jessie. I wasn't born here, but live in London, and wish I was in Niterói right now where my family are, Rafael, so wonderful. And I have spent about 20 odd years in media communication, working globally for BBC Africa, Red Bull Media, IMG Productions, Premier League, all different types of things, music, film, theatre. I'm what's known as a multi-potentialite, but I'm not unique. Pretty much everybody here in this room is a multi-potentialite. You are doing things that you love. You want to make money out of things that you love and that you enjoy. And essentially, that is a strap line for bossing your life. I knew from very early on that communication was really important and telling stories was something that I loved. And it's quite funny hearing Martin at the beginning saying that he started in philosophy, then found that boring and went into the TV, went into the filmmaking world. I actually want to end up in philosophy, Martin. So I want to get my degree in philosophy. It's on my visual board. So I hope it wasn't too boring. You've not put me off. But yeah, so had the pleasure of just producing, exec producing, production managing, working across many different kinds of budgets, and hopefully working with Sucker Punch at some point as well. And the plan was always just to work on things that align to my goal, to my soul's purpose, and to never stay anywhere too long that didn't make me feel good. As a female, as a Black female, it's really important to understand the perception that the world has of you. It's important to understand that regardless of who you are. Whether you have privilege or not, or no privilege, it's super important to be humble as you walk through life. And by doing that, it meant that I understood the systemic, almost poison that's riddled within our film industry and within the TV industry. And rather than sort of sit and protest or wallow about it, I thought, well, how best can I navigate it? How can I make it work for me? And a lot of the time, it's sort of in alignment with the title of today's subject, what's the future of filmmaking? The future is yours. I know that sounds really cheesy, I'm sorry, but it is. It's what you decide to do. It's how you want to navigate the system to best get out of it what you want and what you need. We are all super skilled. We have a creative and a logic side of our brain. And I know a lot of the time, especially as women, we're told that administration and production is the role we need to go down. And I recall coming into Premier League productions saying, you know, I'm a big fan of football and I want to produce as well as production manage. And I think I was laughed at for about a year of the 4 football seasons that I was there, because they were like, well, what do you know about football? How, come on, really? It's so cliche, so boring. And I ended up assisting producing at the last 2 football seasons and was brought into every editorial meeting because I didn't have a hang up about what you thought. It's what I knew and what I loved. I'm now not a big fan of football. Don't tell anybody. I've moved on. I've evolved. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Evolution is really important as well. And I think, again, bringing that back into the pandemic, I know that there are a lot of statistics about how the pandemic has been dire for women and women of color in general. But I've seen people flourishing. I've seen people taking this time to actually look inward, introspection, and actually decide, well, do I really want anything from this industry? What do I want from this industry? What do I want to say? You've got amazing women like Issa Rae. I know I'm going to America, you know, who are doing their own thing. They're going online, they're creating their own content, and then that's getting picked up. During the pandemic myself, I think the key thing I did was birth a human. So I think I need to share that out loud because that's the most important thing that I did. Thank you very much. Secondly to that, I got my 3rd grade as a Wing Chun Sifu. So that's amazing. Jess, I'm going to check out your movie Cage Fighter. I can see Bruce Lee there in the background. And to top that up, I was able to coach over 25 amazing women within the industry who wanted to boss their lives. They weren't quite sure what direction they wanted to go in. And a lot of them were working with huge studios, huge production companies that I won't mention here, that they just wanted out. They wanted to get out. And they didn't realize the power that they had, or they didn't give themselves the permission to understand that they didn't need to be there any longer. If you weren't going to get paid what was aligned to your goals, to your budget or your expenses, your life needs, it's almost as if they needed the permission just to be told that they could go anywhere else. The key thing that I always hear from women within any industry is, but I don't have a linear CV, or my job progression is never linear. And I said, that's amazing. That's what you want in life. You know, long are the days where you have to sit and be a secretary for 30 years or a CEO for 40 years. Now people are dabbling and working in so many other areas. It actually makes you more profitable as an individual, because what you have acquired and the information that you have means that you're adding more value wherever you're going. And that's something that we must remember, as opposed to thinking that, you know, me not being able to stay in one company for a long time shows that, I don't know, the negative sides that can bring within our industry, which isn't true. You know, whether you're a sole trader, limited company, or even somebody on PAYE, it's super important that you're always aligning your goals and your desire for story making within our industry with your soul's purpose. And yeah, that's something that's real, especially as women. There's so many obstacles that we can look at, and we can always say we can't do this, or this isn't possible, or that's difficult, or this person's not letting me in, or I can't. But there is always the other side where you can say, well, this is actually happening, this is a possibility, and this is what I'm going to make work for myself. You know, during just previously, before the pandemic, I was actually, our company was pretty much working remotely, Weirdos and Creatives. We were working with various English language learning companies, creating sort of training videos. We were working with vloggers, and it was quite unique what we were doing. We would train the vloggers. They were already out in the ether. They were influencers, and they would create this content to support young people sort of aged 11 to 18 in the Middle East to learn how to speak English. What was sort of really fascinating about this process was that there were a lot of Black female influencers that we would put forward, and they would always get batted back. There would always be an issue as to why they couldn't be a part of this creative process. And, you know, I've been in the industry for 20 years. I understand microaggression. I've worked on myself, emotional intelligence. That's what I teach. I do that within companies like the BBC. I've just turned down a huge broadcaster who wanted me to come on board because that we weren't aligned. Super important to say no, ladies. I had a chat with the CEO of the company, and I said, well, what's the issue with us not working with these women of color, these creative women? And it was a very challenging conversation to have, more because it was something that they hadn't noticed, or they hadn't realized that some of the issues that they had with the creatives that we were working with weren't aligned. The comments weren't aligned to some of the other, maybe European influencers that we had also chosen to work with us. And it was amazing because after the project, they then signed us up for another 5 years, and we're about to potentially be nominated for an award that I'm not allowed to say. And yeah, granted, it's not the big screen. This is all sort of digital content, and it's online. We are making content with BBC Three and BBC Ideas. We still do a lot of online content, but just sort of showcasing the importance of diversifying who you're working with. I think it was Rafael who mentioned there are production companies in Brazil that are now making, that are going into advertising as well as production. And that's just, yeah, super important, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not, to continuously be diversifying your skill sets, your mindset, and where you want to go. You're still on mute, my love. I can't hear your fabulous voice.
Yeah, I was speechless, literally. Yeah, I still want to ask you more, because it's so important to hear like the female voice here. What changes since you first came into the industry, as a Black female filmmaker, have you seen, and what do you think needs to happen to create more change?
Okay, I'm going to give you a controversial answer, Angel, again, and I sort of said
Thank you.
That the revolution is yours, okay? It's not televised. It's not in the industry. It's yours. It's what you want to do, okay? You need to give yourself permission to really, first of all, every human needs to book a meeting with themselves. Okay, forget booking a meeting with a commissioning editor, with Netflix, with anyone else. First of all, book that meeting with yourself and sit down for an hour, 2, 8, however long you need, and have that discussion. What do I really want to do in life? What's important to me? Where do I want to go? Why do I want to go there? Put aside all of the capitalist, patriarch, westernized views of what's important and what's required of you, or what you're supposed to do. So this might take longer than 8 hours. It depends on how long you need it. I needed a couple of years. So, everyone's different here. And have that conversation with yourself before reaching out into an industry that it's not yours to change. I had a conversation with a huge American-based studio who contacted me to do a series on Boss Your Life. Fantastic, to empower women and to discuss about, you know, what the pandemic means, and sort of similarly to what we're discussing now, being a female of color, and what does that mean in the industry. I'm having a conversation with this individual, and they're basically saying, well, you know, what we really want you to do is to educate all of the men in our industry about what this means. And I said, well, what do you mean? Well, you know, we were thinking that it's super important because our company is actually 98% white male. And I'm like, I'm not the person for you. Then I thought, who am I reaching out to? Like the 10% of women who are within your organization. Happy to do that part, but I'm not here to educate people who might not necessarily want to hear the message and it's not important to them. That isn't my job. You can't, you know, we all have to do that work on ourselves as individuals. That's what's important. So yeah, I pretty much, I turned it down. It would have been lovely money. I could have bought a couple more Bitcoins, not that I have any more at the moment, but yeah. So for me, again, it's going back to your self-worth as an individual and as a female. You know, the film industry, pretty much like, I suppose, any capitalist patriarch system, is ingrained with economics being the key thing. I get that. I'm a businesswoman. I understand that that's important. But when it has so many sort of historical and cultural issues that, you know, I'm going to need to hurry up and do my psychology to be able to support this industry, to get anywhere near the surface of what all of that means. And then by then, how old am I? Where am I? What have I done in my life? What am I fighting for? And if we all just spend more time having meetings with ourselves, being kind to ourselves, I think that, you know, will then manifest into something that's beautiful, whatever type of storytelling it is that you want to say, to do, or to be a part of. So, you know, life doesn't need to be a struggle. It doesn't need to be hard. We create that in our minds, and we've decided that that's what it's going to be. I'm a woman of color, so right, that means it's going to be super difficult for me to get anywhere. I'm not going to be able to work. What am I going to do? Oh, I'm just going to humbly take whatever's given to me. I'm never going to use leverage. I'm never going to negotiate. I'm going to start at zero. My self-worth, where am I? All of this is not conducive to the bigger picture. And you're, again, putting into the universe something that you're not going to receive. Give yourself the permission to be and do whatever you want. You have one life. There's one. Okay. We're currently in a pandemic where, first of all, I hope that everyone here is safe and well. Everything else. So just live your life, be happy, and choose the things that are aligned to your soul's purpose. So don't just pick the big ideas or companies, you know, for the sake of, well, that's going to look great on my CV, or you know, your well-being is key, and it's also important in your sort of story making journey. I hope that answered your question, Angel. I feel
no,
like
yeah, it did, and I really liked it. You know, it wasn't the answer. It was different. You know, as I always say, I'm always learning from you. Thank you so much for this. You know, always learning. Thank you. Moving on, Peter Beard, as I always say to you, it must be very hard to carry 2 BAFTAs, right? I always make this joke. I know you've been.
I've stopped carrying them around with me, Angel. Yeah, I've stopped carrying them around with me now.
Like, hey, 2 BAFTAs. So, no, yeah. I know it's, you know, outstanding. I always like to talk about the work because we worked together. It's amazing. I know you've been busy as usual, even during the pandemic. So yeah. I'm kind of curious what kind of projects you've been working even during the pandemic, and how did you manage that?
Well, so so I run a documentary and drama television production company. So we don't, in fact, I've never done anything for theatrical release. It's always been for TV and more recently for the streamers. So at the beginning of the pandemic, obviously everything stopped, and it was the most terrifying experience, really, running a company, mainly because we had a workforce that we suddenly had to think, what do we do with them? You know, we don't have loads of people working for us, but it was about 15, I suppose. At the time, we were in quite a good point where productions were either coming to an end or were just about to start. So we didn't literally have loads of people out with cameras at that moment, but it was quite terrifying for a while to work out what we could actually do to keep these people employed. Like, most of them were freelancers working for us, so we weren't necessarily able to get them on any of the government's support schemes. So we looked at any sort of fast commissions that we could get, anything that could be made during the pandemic, and we managed to do a couple of those, which were more sort of UGC, user-generated stuff for UK TV channels. And then we looked at what do we do with all of our sort of slate of productions. So at the time we had some stuff in the edit, which was fine, that could just carry on actually as before, although it was a slightly more longer project, including the one that I was directing myself, that I worked with Angel on. We could carry on doing that one, but then we were about to start making a 4-part drama series, a 4-part scripted series for Channel 4. So that paused, and then we got to the point where it became possible to start shooting again. The channels would let you start doing that, and we had to make a decision about, did we sort of start pre-production with the insurance issue in the UK sort of hanging over us? Are we going to be able to insure the project? And we knew that the government was going to bring in an insurance scheme at some point, and could we start doing pre-production to get going? And that's what we decided to do, which was a slightly sort of terrifying thing. And we managed to get a bit more money for sort of COVID protocols. So as Martin was saying earlier about having to, when you're a producer, having to become an expert in sort of everything, having to become an expert in testing regimes for COVID became my sort of main thing. What's the difference between a PCR test and a lateral flow test, and what's the government going to sign off, and you know, how many people have to be in the AE bubble, and what's the close case? You know, it became a sort of a terrifying, all-consuming thing. But we did manage to shoot. So at the end of last year, we shot this drama series mainly around the sort of London area with a full crew. So we had, you know, anywhere from sort of 50 to 100 people on set, all tested twice a week. We had like in one scene, because our biggest issue was, how do you shoot scenes, for instance, where you've got 80 extras or something. We had a nightclub scene. So how do you shoot a nightclub scene in COVID, and how do you manage to get everyone tested without it sort of breaking the bank? But we managed to work our way around those. So we shot that. The thing that really stopped for us, which is a lot of the stuff that I personally look after, which is the observational documentary stuff. So my career personally as a filmmaker and as a director has always been making long form observational projects where I shoot over a year or two. The project I've worked with Angel on has taken about 3 years from start to finish, and it really is just sort of the director, one other person, and a camera filming for ages. Those have been really, really problematic, and we've had to stop doing those. But actually, it's bizarrely, it has coincided anyway, I think, with a slight move in the industry away from doing those. And I think Netflix and places like that have had a big influence on this, more towards retrospective storytelling, and less about, because when you're talking about the budget, so for instance, like the biggest film that I personally directed is a film called My Son the Jihadi, where I essentially filmed with a mother whose son ended up becoming a terrorist and going to fight for Al-Shabaab and being involved in lots of horrid stuff before he died himself, and filming her experience of that. The Netflix project that we're doing at the moment has got a budget that's like 5 times the budget for that. But for that, when they're betting that amount of money, they're not prepared to just let you go and film a woman in her house for a year and hope that something comes of it. So it's actually really, from my point of view, is changing the sort of projects that we're making, because we're not making those projects which are a bit of a gamble and a bit of a risk. They're ones where we can script it a bit more like it's a drama. We can tell the commissioning editor what the story is going to be from start to finish before we go out and shoot it. But actually, bizarrely, the pandemic, because we did stop production for a period of time, we were able to properly sit down. So me and Dave, who I run the company with, we did the process of having a meeting with ourselves, really, about what we wanted the company to be and what we wanted to do and the sorts of projects we wanted to do. And actually, in the wake of that, we did develop a few projects and got some more commissions. So we got another 4-part drama series commissioned through the pandemic, which is about to start shooting. And we got a series about the history of the Premier League, in fact, commissioned for the BBC and a few other things. So in some respects it was a good time, but in other respects it's just been incredibly stressful, and we're having to do very complicated things, and there's not much more money to do it with, and everything costs more money, and it's all a bit more stressful.
Yeah, I can't imagine how much, the costs with the protocols. Now you have to, they've been like.
Because, yeah, I mean, even those insurance schemes, it's sort of 1% of your budget to go into those insurance schemes, which doesn't sound like an awful lot of money, but it is an awful lot of money to pay into that insurance. And that's just to cover you if the sort of project just stops because of COVID. You've still got to pay all your normal insurances. You've got to pay all of that testing. I mean, really, what I wish I'd done is set up a testing company at the beginning of the thing, because then I would be.
Yeah, maybe the new business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's been the tricky thing, and places, some of the channels are better than others. Some of the studios are better than others in terms of paying your COVID costs. Some really don't contribute towards them, some do an awful lot, but it always costs us as the producer more than they're giving us in terms of COVID. And not just actually because of the literal cost, but nothing was made for so long that now it's so complicated. Now there's so much stuff being made at once because we're coming back to life in the UK in quite a big way in terms of shooting, that it's really hard to get staff. The prices on everything has gone up massively, and it's a complicated time to be a producer at the moment.
Yeah. Here in Brazil, and I'm always talking to friends, people start saying, oh, things are going to be much harder now. The industry is kind of, changing a lot because of COVID and cinemas, how is it going to be? So do you think, because, you produce mainly for TV, do you think everything would be shown as TV series format with no need for cinemas? Just what do you think?
I desperately hope not. I mean, I make TV, but I love film. Going to the cinema is still by far my favorite experience, and I hope and dream that we do make projects that get theatrical releases. But I think, it's interesting. So the sorts of documentaries, that have had theatrical releases, so it's mainly still the documentary side that I personally work on. I am across the scripted side, but not so much. It's now possible with places like Netflix to get that sort of budget and that sort of cinematic ambition for feature length or series, which I think is a sort of really brilliant thing. But there's nothing quite like the experience of the sort of communal watching of something in a cinema with other people, and having that, the sort of the guarantee that someone is going to sit down for 90 minutes and watch this, and you're not having to just hold on to them for the first 5-10 minutes of the film and make sure they don't flip over to the next channel, which is basically, like, sounds horrible to say that's 90% of your job as a TV director, is make sure that someone doesn't switch over to the next channel, which you don't have that. In the cinema, someone's going to sit down and watch it, and you can let the story build, and some of that has crossed over into Netflix and their ambition, which I think is good. But I still think that there is always going to be a desire for that sort of 90-minute, 2-hour feature, because it is the most satisfying thing to watch in terms of a product on its own. We have, whether we've been programmed to be that way or whether we are that way, we see things in 3-act or 5-act structures. That's how we organize the sort of chaos of the world in our heads. There's a reason why films are structured that way. And think that there would always be a place for that. There's always going to be. I don't think that's going to change. Whether or not it's always going to be released theatrically, or whether there's going to be some sort of crossover. But I know certainly I will always go to the cinema. And my kids' experience, you know, I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old who have been going to the cinema since before they could crawl. And they just are totally captivated by that experience. And I don't think that's going to change. So I really hope that everyone who's on this panel that does make sorts of features do get them in the cinema rather than them just going out on Netflix. But I equally I think Netflix is brilliant because that's what I watch 90% of my films on these days. But it doesn't come close to the experience of watching it in the cinema, really. Yes,
indeed. Thank you so much. Again, thank you. I can't stop saying thank you to all of you. Rupert, I'm going to get back to you.
Yeah.
I think you have more questions.
Well, yeah, firstly, thanks, Pete. I rewatched My Son the Jihadi earlier. I was like, it's harrowing. I forgot how harrowing it is. So thank you for that. But I highly recommend people watching it if they've not seen it. And yeah, I have a few questions, but actually before I put them out there, if any of the panelists have any questions for each other or have any thoughts, feel free to unmute yourself and just like chuck something out there. Otherwise, I'll throw something out there.
I had a question actually. I thought Rafael said something really interesting, which was about that, about audience sort of desires being slightly different in the wake of a pandemic, not wanting to watch deeply harrowing documentaries like My Son the Jihadi, for instance. But I've been thinking about this a lot recently because my experience as a filmmaker is making stuff which is quite challenging. But actually, I now, because in my heart, I want as many people to watch the things that I make as possible. I want it to sort of appeal to as many people. I was wondering if the other sort of filmmakers are have that in the sort of forefront of their mind at the moment, whether they think they should start making stuff which is a bit easier to watch, I suppose, or a bit more easily engaging for people who are personally going through quite challenging stuff and might want some relief from that.
I think that in Brazil we have a tradition of
creative.com.
In Brazil we have a tradition of art movies, so I believe that we have public funding here. We had at least public funding here for a while, and we have a very artistic view in the movie sector. I mean, because we have this popular TV network, which is Rede Globo, which is the third largest TV network in the world. So it has a kind of got a grip on the audience. So we had soap operas reaching out 100 million people, 100 million people per in each episode. So it's a massive audience. So when people started to do films, I'm not saying that every Brazilian filmmaker is an art filmmaker, or art in that horrible sense that we talked, which is a non-commercial movie. But we have this, not all of the filmmakers in Brazil are that way. We have a strong comedy sector here in the filmmaking industry. We had movies last year that reached out about 20 million people, 5 million people in the cinemas in Brazil. This is a lot of people, because here in Brazil we have only 3,000 cinemas. It's too little. It's too little because in the US, for instance, you have in the US and Canada about 50,000. So cinemas is not the main window for exhibition here in Brazil. So, but nonetheless, the comedies have been reaching out for audience, and they have been finding this audience. But mainly we have these directors and producers thinking about art, and that's nice because we know that this more artistic movies, the more they help advance the art itself. So it's nice to see that. But since the public funding went away, we don't have that money right now. So people are starting to look after more commercial products. So people are talking about comedies because we have in Brazil a huge tradition of comedy since the 20s and the 30s, and we have this comedy vein here. We in Brazil, people like to watch action movies, for instance, but action movies are quite expensive. So when we have action movies in Brazil, they are a huge success. But it's hard to put the funding on place to do it, because here in Brazil it would cost around maybe $3 million, which is a very low budget for the American standards, but for Brazil it's a huge money. So we're talking about maybe $3 to $4 million to make a huge action movie in Brazil. This is a lot of money, so we don't have this kind of money right now. So people are aiming for those genres that could help them get the audiences, because the main funding right now comes from Netflix and Amazon and Disney and Globoplay. Globoplay has not invested in movies so far, but they will. They will. Netflix here in Brazil is looking for comedies, light comedies, action movies, thriller movies. They're looking for that kind of stuff. They are now the biggest budget we have in Brazil for production, for movie production. But they demand reach. They demand reaching the audience. They demand clicks. They demand that the audience relate with the product. So Brazilian filmmakers are looking for that right now. And this is a very good time for screenwriters, I think, because we have this moment to present lots of stuff, lots of fresh stuff. But also we see that these streaming companies, they keep saying, okay, man, if I'm going to produce something like the Americans do or the English guys do, I'll produce it in England or in America. So if I want to produce something in Brazil, you must bring your taste, this must be something that only Brazilians could do. So you must talk with your reality to make it global. So it's a kind of local thing. You talk locally, then you go global. So I think that the most the products in Netflix that reached larger audiences in Brazil had this characteristic. We had a movie a few months ago, a Christmas movie called I don't know the title in English. In Portuguese was Tudo Bem no Natal que Vem. It was a movie from Paulo Cursino, which is a hit maker here in Brazil. And Netflix aired this movie, and it was top 10 in over 10 countries, 10 different countries. It was top 10 in the US, top 3 in the US, and top 10 in the US, I think, for 5 weeks. So it was a huge hit. For a non-English speaking movie. It was a movie entirely spoken in Portuguese. So this is very hard to reach. And we have a few series that have this as well. We have a series right now called Me Chama de Bruna, which was the story of a former prostitute in Brazil, which was very famous because she published a book. And this, they made a series in Fox Network. And this was, I heard that from Fox itself. They said that it was the second largest audience in a Fox series after The Walking Dead. So a Brazilian TV series was the second largest audience series in Fox Network. So I think that we have this potential to grow, but I think that Brazil and other countries as well must think globally, must think global conflicts, global situations, but with a local approach. So you should look for your own reality, your own little idiosyncrasies, and from that idiosyncrasies on, you can start discussing a global issue, and like people are doing everywhere. So Martin, for instance, his movies has a lot of this because we are. So that was a hit. So he thought locally, but the conflicts were global. So I think that this is what we're going to expect from now on.
Thank you, Rafael. Before I ask some questions from the audience, anyone else from the panel want to answer Pete's question? Any thoughts on how they're kind of aiming their films? Are they trying to? Are you thinking about kind of staying away from dark kind of genres or comedies, or are you aiming for more?
I would like to make an open question for the panel. here in Brazil, I'm feeling that although the series are arriving here with full throttle, so with full force, and we are producing a lot of TV series. I think that I've heard that from a few players a few days ago, that it's being each time it's harder for a producer here in Brazil to get the funding on place to produce a series. So things start turning over to features again. Are you seeing this? Because when you talk about streaming companies, most of us right now think about, oh, okay, they're gonna make produce series because we're gonna binge watch them, and that's the thing they are doing right now. But here in Brazil, people, it's not just one guy. Maybe 3 or 4 different producers have come to me and said, okay, let's do movies because our slot of series is not getting us anywhere. So are you guys feeling that in England as well? Movies are the thing right now, or maybe it's balancing? How do you feel that?
Love to chip in on this one. I'll definitely say from my experience in talking to the streamers at the moment, they are very much gung-ho about feature films. You know, single stories told over 90 minutes, 2 hours. That is still a very big thing for them. And one of the reasons why I think that's the case is, you know, you're seeing a glut of, you know, really just high-end television coming onto the market. And a lot of it is struggling to find an audience because, first of all, there's so much of it. There's so much good stuff. And secondly, you know, it's that commitment factor. It's when you have that story in a long form, which is, you know, the payoff may be 5 seasons away, you know, and you started, and if you're not, you know, you sort of make an emotional decision. I do it all the time. I'll watch something, I'll watch the first episode, and I'll just go, I just haven't got it in me to see this to the end, so I'm out. And because of that, you know, streamers will always want the long form serial. They'll want to have you coming back again and again and to eke out all of the content that they can from a single piece of IP. But the movie is still the simplest and easiest thing to commission as a story. It still is. So, you know, going back to what everything, you know, Peter and Rafael, what you were saying, I think the movie isn't dead, but I think theaters might be. And the 2 different things. We have to separate the movie length from the theatrical experience. I'm sorry, I'll just be really quick on this. There's one point I wanted to say, because I think one of the things I think is odd is the theatrical experience is becoming basically the preserve of the blockbuster, right? So it's only really, that's the only thing that's kind of justifying the existence of, you know, the theatrical experience, you know, financially. But the problem is those blockbusters need, you know, or the cinemas need more content. So they need the independent films as well. They need those to, you know, in terms of the general choice for the consumer. So I'm not sure what happens if the theatrical experience is so difficult for the independent film, but the blockbuster needs them, but the blockbuster doesn't do anything to support the independent movie. I don't know what happens there, but I think that's a conundrum anyway. And that was my point. I see time's racing, so that's my idea.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really interesting. We literally only have a few minutes. If you guys don't mind carrying, if it runs over, just a few minutes, but I might as well, unless anyone else from the panel has anything they want to shout out, I might just ask some of the questions that have already been put out there. So a quick question to Rafael from Felipe. In his opinion, do movies like City of God still have a place to a large audience or only comedies? And that's for Rafael.
Sorry, I didn't answer. I didn't hear you.
Oh, no worries. So Felipe asks, in your opinion, will movies like City of God still have a place to a large audience or only comedies?
No, I think action movies have a place. They have a place. City of God was a landmark in Brazilian cinematography, so it has influenced a lot of filmmakers all over the world. So, Charlone, which was the cinematographer, the techniques that he used are being used up till now. For me, he's just as important as other cinematographers like Dickens, like Dickens, or maybe Lubeski. So I think that Seed of God was a landmark. And when we had, just after that, we had Elite Squad, and we have other action movies as well. So I believe that they have a place in the heart of the audiences. I don't think that they will have the money to be produced right now. So I think that they must be put on hold for this moment, and maybe wait for a better occasion to try and land them again.
City of God was made for about $10,000, wasn't it? Something crazy. That was a different story back then. But another question, I'll just put it out to all of you, from Duncan Moore. Hello, Duncan. I'm noticing more short films, especially OFTA and BAFTA nominated, appearing on major streaming platforms. Do you think the streamers' constant demand for material and COVID's disruption of traditional distribution models will place more distribution opportunities for short filmmakers? Or will provide more distribution opportunities for short filmmakers? If anyone wants to
I genuinely don't know, so I'd love to hear the answer to this one as well.
I don't know either about shorts, I'm afraid.
Nope. Sorry, Dan.
Short movies are a trick thing, because they don't have a market, but they can absolutely launch a career. So I have seen a lot of people with short movies. If you have a strategy to release it, if you focus on the qualifying festivals to put on your short movie in those, I think that they can actually launch a career. But I don't see how marketable they are right now. I have a short movie that I didn't edit it, for instance. I have shot, but I haven't ended the movie because I didn't see how I could market it. So I think they are here. They are nice. The secret is, how do you shoot a short movie without making it seem like a college movie? This is the trick part of it. That's the same issue that we face when we are talking about low budget movies. How do you shoot a low budget film without making it look like a low budget film? Because it's how do you deliver production value with a movie in a low budget, not that budget? How do you deliver production value in a short movie? So I think that's the thing.
Yeah, it's where we learn, right? I guess, making short films.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can use it as a proof of concept as well. So
yeah,
you shoot a specific scene or specific sequence of your feature script and launch it as a actually Damien Chazelle made this with Whiplash. Whiplash was a short movie, which was just one scene of Whiplash, and then he made the movie, which is one of my most favorite movies. So it definitely can launch for you.
I was just going to say that I think I was wondering if what Duncan was noticing is sort of, the short films that are getting greater profile on the streamers. I think it could be just what you're saying. It's essentially the proof of concepts for larger projects. So they're happy to go out and test those. So if Duncan, if you're interested in short filmmaking, maybe that's a route to sort of explore it, to have something that's it's adjacent to some movie property or TV or long form serial that you can expand it in some way, and you're doing it as a proof of concept. That might be why they're picking it up, but I honestly don't know why that's happening.
One more. Okay, one more question from the audience. Andre asks, what do you think about the openly aggressive Brazilian government reaction against films with a direct or not political element, like Back Row, Marighella, The Edge of Democracy, and others? Do you think it will impact furthermore in future productions besides all the pandemic's problems?
This is a problem because art shouldn't be censored at all. So when we see the government attacking a filmmaker, this is bad. This is bad for the business. This is bad for art, and this is bad for everyone. But I don't see how this is gonna put the Brazilian scene on hold, because we don't have public money at all. Not since 2017. So if we can't count on public money, why should we care about what politicians say about our movies? We don't have that funding. So sorry, fuck them. Fuck what they're saying. That's the real thing. They are not paying anything, so they can say what they can say. But Obama loved Bacurau, so that's nice. Okay,
That's good.
That's good.
Nice. Cool. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything. Again, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to say is one of the main things we want to do is our focus is always education, whether it's through the favelas, what we're doing and what Angel's doing in Rio particularly, and then the same thing here. And a big shout out to Mummy Youth, who are doing great things in London and the UK generally, offering free education to underprivileged kids, trying to get them in the film industry. And also people who are at university but don't have a door or a way in. And I think that's really important. And so a lot of what Pamella said, I think, was really useful. And I did have a question I wanted to throw at her, but I think we've kind of gone over. So we'll leave that for another time. But a huge thank you to everyone who's joined us. I just we're hoping to host a few of these a year, maybe 4 a year, 3 a year. And so just keep an eye out for us, and please get in touch. The next one will be a screening of our first film, our short film, Dark Justice, with a Q&A with the charity Stop So, who are in association with it, and some other charities who work in the child abuse sector. So talking about dark content, there we go. We're out there doing it still. So yeah. Yeah, I want to say, of course, thank you again to all of you. Thank you so much. We have our business partner, Paulina Petit. She's in the backstage, but yes, I want to say, it comes from her also. Yeah. I have to say that in Portuguese, I'm sorry. O pessoal do Brasil, queria agradecer muito por vocês estarem aqui hoje. Obrigada pelo suporte. Muito obrigada. É assim que tem que ser. Yeah, guys, this is how we grow. This is how we grow, supporting each other. And we are all, I feel so honored being among friends. Thank you so much for everything. And I'm sorry for any gaps. This was the very first one. As I said before, I was shitting my pants. I'm okay now, but all good. Thank you, guys. Huge thank you to everyone who's watched.
You guys are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a lovely evening. Take care.